Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge. I'm your host, Alan Sanders, and joining me once again, Walt Murray. Walt, welcome, buddy. How's it going?
Hey, doing good. How about you?
Apparently, I don't know your name anymore. I was like, whoa. Hey, woo-woo, how are you?
Been called worse, believe me.
That's true. Well, I found out something about you. Apparently, you've been taken deep and wide before we started.
That was mostly out of context.
Yeah, well, the fact that it's out of context, I don't care. That's what you said.
Hey, modern journalism, anything goes.
Oh, man. So I can't believe it's been a week since our last guest. We had a great country artist, and we've got another guy coming our way in just a few minutes. I'll set the stage quickly to let you know that it's going to be one of my lifelong buddies, Eric Wojciechowski. This guy has also had so many different careers, or sort of, I guess, concurrent careers, from being a parole officer, being an author, being involved in UFOlogy, being involved in talking about matters of reason and logic, and being a lifelong libertarian. It's going to be an interesting discussion to find out a little bit about my buddy growing up all the way from Michigan, just outside of Detroit.
Well, you should be forewarned, because if you didn't learn anything from when Hawk was on, when you bring somebody on who's got all the dirt on you, you never know what's coming out.
Oh no, trust me. I'm sitting back going, well, I mean, people have already listened to our shows. They already know that I don't really have a filter. So
this is true.
We'll be fine.
This is true. And mine malfunctions at the weirdest times.
All right. Well, since last week, what's been going on with you? Anything special? Anything crazy? Do you have to call your dad, see if he's still alive?
It's funny. I was just talking to him about that today and reminding him to listen to our episode, because I was like, oh yeah, we talked about you. He said, oh really? What was it? And I said, oh, your apparent death. So he was excited to listen to that episode, but no, nothing quite that exciting. I went back to now that things are starting to open again, I've been back at the gym, and yeah, I was kind of reminded of why they should probably keep the gym closed a little bit longer. Some men tend to not use as good a judgment as other people.
Wait a minute. Are we talking about body art, or are we talking about basic cleanliness and hygiene?
Oh, no, we're talking about people who think that they can use the hot tub by the pool without any clothes on.
No, come on.
So this guy comes walking out of the locker room with just a towel on, and he's a larger man, and so the towel didn't cover everything. Fortunately, we just got a really good view of his big fat leg, and as he goes walking by, everybody's kind of looking at each other like, did we just really see that?
Did we see what we just think we saw?
Yeah. And so he heads over to the hot tub, and this lady, thankfully there was a Karen there who went running over to the lifeguard and was like, that guy is naked.
What's up with that dude?
So this poor 18-year-old lifeguard had to go over and be like, dude, you can't come out here without clothes on.
Hey, Mr. Pale White Sausage, you're not allowed to do this.
Yeah, and we're all kind of like, how tone deaf can you be? Just, swimsuit, shorts, something, But no, he decided that the hot tub was just for him only, I guess, and tried to scare everybody else off. So I'm very rarely without words, but in that one, I was kind of dumbfounded. I was like, how do you not know that this public hot tub is not just for your own personal naked enjoyment?
Hey, when I signed up for the couple package, I thought it'd been any couple I wanted. How you doing?
Yeah, so that was a little eye-opening, and I was like, oh, COVID, please come back.
Whole new meaning to thar she blows.
Yeah. We would hope not.
There be the white whale. Oh my God.
Yeah, and I know that there are rules, like there's a family only changing room, and they have, like individual little areas in there that moms can go in and change their kids. Well, I think it was that guy who they put the sign up that said families only, no individual people in the family changing area. So apparently some people just don't get basic, courtesy rules of society here.
That's kind of creepy. Hey, don't mind me. I just like watching little children change.
Yeah, that's kind of unnerving.
It would be. Well, on my end, didn't have a whole lot. We were getting ready we're getting ready to go tomorrow. We're going to do another couple of 4 or 5 days of glamping. And we're doing that as we're going as we're recording this into our Father's Day weekend. So we've got the van all packed already. We got to put the kayaks on there. So that's all. I've been kind of just focused on that. The only other thing that we did was everybody that I know, including our guest that's going to be coming on, this is a lot of people are in my birth year. They're all turning 50 all of a sudden. And so we did a surprise 50th birthday for this wife, the woman who we're all friends with as all of our couple friends. And so we were all kind of embroiled in this sort of subterfuge of this 50th wedding anniversary planning, trying to fake her out, thinking it was sort of like everybody, sloughed it off. We weren't really going to do anything special. And we were going to get together. And then it was like, well, maybe we'll put you on a little treasure hunt. And so we had to go from location to location for clues and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it ended up with it was a pretty fun evening. And then part 2 of it was we were going to go out on her husband just bought one of those new triple pontoon boats. They used to be, you have 2 pontoons. Now you've got 3. I guess, I don't know, it makes it more stable or whatever. But so he just got one of those and he wanted to take everybody out on the lake anyway. Well, I realized something at the last minute getting ready for our time at the lake. During this whole shutdown, I've been doing a lot of outdoor work. I've been building raised garden beds, building the garden, doing a lot of lawn work, doing a lot of landscaping, a lot of outside stuff. But I learned very early on in my landscaping days, you need to wear jeans because when you're using power tools, when you're using any kind of tools, it's kicking things up. My shins always get beat up. So I've got the ultimate farmer's tan. Well, I wasn't worried too much about my arms because they're all nice and tan. I put on a bathing suit and I look like an Arctic, prisoner had escaped. I looked like I was translucent from my neck down to my freaking abdomen. I looked sick. I looked like those pictures in French Renaissance paintings where all the women are white. I'm not talking about Caucasian. I'm talking about like alabaster white. And I was like, oh shit, I better put some sunscreen on because I'm going to turn red real fast.
Oh yeah. Well, I use a 50. So,
oh yeah. When I think my wife had a 70, yeah. which was like you're putting on paste, which is great because you got to rub it for like 12 hours before it starts to soak in. It's awesome. So, but no, thankfully the boat had a cover. So that way a bimini cover so I could stay under it. And I did most of the time. We did park in a cove, did some swimming. Ultimately though, it was just a fun weekend on the lake. Hadn't been on the water in a while. I mean, I went kayaking, but as far as being on a power boat and the air here in our area of the woods, our neck of the woods of the United States in Georgia. I mean, Walt, how great has this early summer been or late spring, I guess? I mean, we had dry air. We had some pretty decent temperatures today. We're not even 80 degrees. We're in the upper 70s. So I'll take it.
I think we've had like one day where it hit 90, and that is really unusual for us at this time.
We are unseasonably cool, so I like it. I'm okay with it. So I'm hoping it stays that way for camping. I know I saw the temperature supposed to warm up to the upper 80s by the weekend, but then we're going to have a frontal system come through at the same time that's going to shift the winds from out of the north. So even though we're looking at 89 or 90 degrees on Saturday, it's going to be like 45 or 50% relative humidity. And when you're in the shade, it's going to feel cool. So I'm all for it. I can't wait to hit the camping. I'm still going to be close enough to go to work though. So I got to still go to work, but I don't mind that. I just have to get up earlier and leave the campsite, go do some hours of radio. And then I come back. And by that point, everybody's just waking up. And so I'm not missing anything. It's just, I get the less sleep. So that's all it is.
Years ago, I went to the Philippines and you fly into the Philippines in a 747, basically wherever you're coming from. And we land, and I remember getting off, and people were like, man, the humidity here is so bad. I'm like, nah, that's okay. I live in Georgia. This is fine. And I think the whole summer there, I mean, it got hot, but it's tropical. But I think most of the time I was like, yeah, the humidity's about right.
Yeah, we're used to it down here. Anyway, well, that's going to be it for us until we, I don't know, see what happens. I'll maybe have some interesting stories next week when we come back with our next guest. But let's go and open up the green room doors. We'll part the curtain on Johnny Carson's stage to say welcome to our guest joining us now, my good buddy that I met way back in 8th grade at Mallow Junior High, just outside of Detroit, an area we called, I think it was between Utica and Rochester, Michigan. Eric Wojciechowski. Eric, welcome to our show. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you join us. I know you and I chatted several weeks ago, and I threw it by you. I said, are you dumb enough? I left the dumb enough out. I'm like, are you interested in joining the show? And you said, sure, sounds like fun.
Well, he's your friend, so that kind of the dumb enough question wasn't even really on the table at all, was
the
it?
The fact that he still is shows, lack of judgment there.
That's the amazing thing, was we met in like 8th grade and you moved, and yet we still kept in touch. And this is before the internet.
Right.
But I think we did lose touch. But in the 90s, you discovered, if I'm remembering, Lycos at the time. And that's how you found me.
It was one of the early internet crawlers. And I just said, I'm going to start looking, and we're going to jump around, I guess, a little bit. But I did find, I'm like, there's some guy that spells his name exactly like my buddy that got involved with the Libertarian Party. If that's who I think it is, I'm going to send him an email and see if he responds. And boom, found you.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be Googling people, because the last old friend that I tried to Google, I found his gravestone. So I don't Google people anymore.
Yeah, but hey, you just told me before we even started. That means now I'm officially your longest, oldest friend.
Yeah, you're my oldest friend, going back to, like I said, 8th grade. The one prior to that was 6th grade.
You ever sit there, head in your hands, thinking to yourself, what did I do wrong?
Well, I guess it's, what did I do right? Because we still didn't we started the blog together? The Freedom Cocktail. Like, it's like we're still doing stuff together, still trying to figure out a way that we can meet somewhere in the middle of the states, Tennessee or Kentucky. I would love to get my paddleboard together with your kayak and do something like that, even just for a weekend. Yeah,
we're going to make that happen. I think, depending on what's going on with the world and diseases floating around, I'm going to go wherever I want. I've been going wherever I want, so I'll be more than happy to make that happen. Just as soon as some of the other money starts flowing from the other businesses that are all on hold, while people are deciding whether or not they're going to have any marketing budgets. So
yeah, we were supposed to go see Ricky Gervais in Toronto in August, and he told me that they're not doing the show. He said, we're going to honor the tickets, but we're not doing the show because the border's it's still closed till July 31st.
That's nuts.
Yeah, the whole world. So.
Let's set the Wayback Machine as we always do at the start of these, and then Walt's going to jump in off and on depending on how things go. Let's go back, because there is something magical, I think, that happens to all adolescents, at least when we were growing up, anywhere between that 11 to 14-year range. If we look back, the movies we loved, the kinds of movies or the kinds of directors or the kinds of things we gravitated toward, I think hit us in our sweet spot. And I think that's when you and I also met. So thanks to you, we had movies like Poltergeist that I watched with you, Fast Times at Ridgemont High I watched with you, Mad Max I watched with you. So you even introduced me to Metallica when I came back for my first summer visit in 1986. So you have been a pretty big influence on my life. I think maybe I need to adjust myself.
Eric, I don't know if you want to take credit for that or not.
Yeah, well, I don't remember introducing him to Metallica, but I do remember my introduction to Metallica. I had never heard anything that hard before. I was into the same music that Alan was into, like Cinderella and Twisted Sister and Quiet Riot, which is really tame. And then all of a sudden, a friend of mine in the 10th grade, I believe, he gave me the cassette tape of Master of Puppets. And I'm like, okay. And I still remember where I was sitting in my parents' living room with my headset on, and I hit play, and I was like, I got scared. I'm like, what? This is so hard. I don't know what to do with this right now. And now it's actually pretty tame compared to some of the other stuff that's out there.
Oh, yeah. No, when I know the exact moment I flew up there was 1986. I didn't realize the album had come out. I'd never even heard of this band. I remember we came up there. We were in your room. You had your stereo system up in the corner. You said, okay, I need you to listen to this. I'm going to put headphones on you, and you just don't say a word. Just listen. And
Because
you
that's what happened to me.
Yeah, and you put on the first song of Master of Puppets, you put on Battery, and I'm thinking, oh, it starts off all nice and melodic, and what is this? And all of a sudden, when it kicks in, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I just had that stupid grin of like, holy crap.
Right, exactly. And then, of course, if you move into punk rock and stuff like that, like the Ramones or The Fear was another one that really did it for me, the song Let's Have a War. And it's like, I've never been the same.
No, neither one of us have. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of our interests, because we did have a few things that aligned us early that I think almost labeled us early on as nerds because everybody thought the computer was a fad. But you and I both were fans of the Commodore 64, and that's one of the things we actually used to get together for long sleepover weekends. We would play Commodore computer games, watch cable movies, and we would play D&D.
Yeah, my favorite Commodore game is still Space Taxi, and I found it. I actually found a copy of it, and I lost it. Hard drive died or something. Like you could play it on Windows, but it's one of those things like the old Atari games, Pitfall and so forth. You actually go back to them, you're like, no, this ain't fun. This ain't fun anymore. It's past its time.
Yeah, there's that nostalgia of going back and maybe playing on an emulator for some things, but then you go,
yeah.
It's like when I told this story, Walt's already probably tired of it. It's like when I went back and showed my kids the movie Willow, because I'm like, oh, you'll love this if you loved Lord of the Rings. And they laughed at Willow. They're like, this is stupid. So I was like, okay.
Right. Yeah, there's some movies that, Go ahead.
A few months ago, I stumbled into an arcade down in Brunswick, Georgia. And it to me, it's still, it's a little bit different, of course, from those types of games where you're plugging the console into your TV and playing. But some of that magic is still there. And you find one of those games that you loved as a kid, and it's almost like reliving your youth when you get to stand there and play it. So, there is some of that nostalgia even with some of those games. But you're right. After a few minutes, you're kind of like, wow, this is pretty basic.
Well, the one that I will always drop quarters into is Joust. You guys remember Joust?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If I ever see a Joust machine, I'm like, I'm going to be here for about a half hour. Just hang out.
Well, depending, I was always a fan of the, what do you call it? The line tracing games. So like Battlezone, Tempest, anything that was drawn with like almost a the line tracing. I forgot. I don't know what if that's what they call it, or ray tracing or line tracing. But
yeah,
I love that. And anytime I've been to a classic arcade, there's always a moment where you're like, oh my God, I remember what this was like. And hey, you and I, how much money did we sink into Dragon's Lair when that was the hot video game?
It was the first game that was 50 cents. That I remember was 50 cents. Yeah. And we would drop about $5. And since I was so bad at it, I dropped $5 in about 2 minutes.
Yeah. We went to that ice cream place. Remember?
Stroh's. It was called Stroh's.
Yeah.
It finally folded. It is no longer there anymore. Going back maybe about 10 years. But the last time I was in there, I took my kids. I'm getting some Blue Moon ice cream. I'm going to show you where I used to spend my money. And the same old woman was there, and she looked the same. I was like, wait, you look like this when I was 11. Terminator just came to mind. I was like, this ain't your real job. You do something else and you're not real. But I think she finally passed away because it's closed. So.
Yeah, she's like, you find out she's like that 900-year-old woman who keeps telling all the little kids the same joke, so that way they still live for like year after year after year.
Yep, that's right. So
all right, well,
but at least she didn't see you and say, look, I threw you out of here in 1991. Get out.
No. Yeah, I didn't. We didn't cause any kind of vandalism. We were good boys, weren't we, Alan?
Well, you turned worse when I left.
Nope. We're not talking about that. But I will say this: when people find out what I do for a living now, they're like, "How?"
Okay, well, let's do that. Let's dive into that first, because we set the stage. Obviously, computer games, nerddom, all that stuff, D&D. You were a writer. I like to write. We both exchanged short stories for a lot of our lives.
I have all of them still. If you want the Invisible Giant, I have it.
I know you do. I gotta get it back because I don't have it anywhere. But let's go back to after I moved. We did stay in touch. It was a lot of the letter writing. You actually shifted a career that you thought you would never, ever have. And I want to start off there talking about how in the world did a job tied somewhat to law enforcement land in your lap?
Okay. It actually goes back to, I wanted to go into computer science, but I'm so bad at math that I couldn't even get out of the 00, I call it the James Bond math, 007. I couldn't even get up to the 100 level classes. I had to decide what I was going to do. And I was really enjoying my psychology classes. And because I was also in the punk rock movement and so forth, just the whole concept of deviance was really interesting to me. So you just start taking classes like normal social psychology or normal psychology, social psychology, and you just start learning about deviance. And of course, what kind of job do you end up getting into if you're studying deviance? But generally something in law enforcement. Although my goal was to become a prison psychiatrist. And I think that goes all the way back to Hannibal Lecter, because when I saw that movie, I was like, yeah, I want to do that job. Not Hannibal's job.
I was going to say, you want to be a serial killer?
No, I thought meeting people like that, behavioral profiling, I thought that would be an amazing job. But I never ended up in graduate school.
So you had a background now in psychology, which is ironic because I ended up shifting my focus, and I have a degree in psychology. I also have a degree with, actually it's a minor in English and Lit because I love to write. And I was on the 5-year apparently education plan where I just kept saying, but I like these classes now. And I like these classes now. And my parents were like, great, you're about to run out of your GI Bill and we're not paying for anything. So I was like, oh crap, I got to graduate.
I still do that now. You've got that website, Great Courses. And you can download, if you want to take a college class, you don't need to go to college. If you just want to learn something like ancient history, you don't need to spend $40,000 to go get a 4-year degree. You can spend like $200 and get an entire college course. You can study on your own. So you can still do that, by the way. You don't have to be in college.
I have downloaded several of the world's greatest lectures. I had one guy that was like all about war, and every class was a new element of war, from the Peloponnesian War to what was it? That 300 was based on the
King Leonidas.
But what was that war called? It was the
Persian.
Thermopylae, the Battle of Thermopylae.
Thank you. Yes,
the Battle of Thermopylae. I was just enamored listening to these, and you're right. Now it doesn't count toward an actual degree, I don't think, but you can still better yourself.
That's okay. How many people have degrees in history that actually practice it?
Not none. They hold signs and they go out marching.
There's a lot of people that they get degrees and then they don't work in their field. In fact, I actually changed careers for a while and did eventually go into IT. So I almost threw away my college degree to go and do something else.
So what drew you to being a parole officer? Because that's what you are. That's still what you are to this day. So that's one of your big careers. That's the one that kind of puts the major food on the table. Tell us how that happened.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm actually a probation officer, but my official title is probation parole officer because I can do either job. Probation is, we only work with felony cases, most cases. And if the judge feels that you don't belong in prison, we're going to put you on probation to prove you don't belong in prison. Parole is on the other side of that. You get out of prison early, you spend some time being watched and supervised to make sure that you're ready to join society. How I got into it again was basically through my interest in deviance and crime. And then I don't know, so my psychology classes, I ended up deciding, what am I going to minor in? I ended up minoring in criminal justice. And the program at Oakland University was so young that when I went to meet the person who was running it in the sociology department, I said, so how many students have gone through your program? He said, well, you're number 50. So now there's a full-blown criminal justice course at Oakland University, but back then it was just a concentration.
Wow.
So I got out of college in 1993. I graduated, and like all college graduates, I used my degree for the first 2 years working in a bookstore. That was still my favorite job. And as I look at the clock, I can retire in about 5 years, and I think I'm going to go back to that. I think that's what I'm going to do. But so while I was working in the bookstore, a guy that I had gone to college with, same classes, he comes in and he's showing me his badge. He just started working for the Department of Corrections. They're hiring. You should go throw your resume in there. So I did, and I got hired. So July 31st of 1995, I go downtown, and I've been doing the job ever since, except for about a 2-year stint where I tried IT, but I didn't care for that as a career, so I went back to being a probation officer. Now I work in Northwest Detroit.
Oh, wow! You that's a heck of a place to do that job.
Yeah, it's a playground. It's a place where everybody brings balloons to work, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Detroit gets a bad reputation over
I
the
wonder
past,
why that is.
over the past several years. I've seen it really coming back. A lot of younger people are moving in. A lot of it has to do with the housing crisis. Like one time I was out visiting some of my clients and I saw a sign on the tree. This was in 2008. I saw a sign on a tree. It said $50 or best offer. And I know they weren't talking about the tree. That's how cheap people were buying up entire blocks. The city was selling certain lots for $50. Just give us $50 and here you can own it.
And now it's your problem.
Yeah, a lot of younger people are moving in. There's a lot of development going on. There's a lot of community farming. I mean, the city was built for 2 million. Last census, there was about 700,000. But the downtown is looking beautiful. It's coming back. It really is.
Have you ever seen the website, The Ruins of Detroit?
I ran a Facebook page called something like that at one point, where as I was out driving around visiting my people, I would stop and take photographs. But yeah, there's still that stuff's still there, but it's slowly being taken care of.
Well, I noticed the last time I was on that, they also showed the footage of those buildings being destroyed. So it looks like they have really done a pretty good job of starting the process of rebuilding and making it a much more modern city.
Yeah, downtown Detroit is beautiful. Downtown Detroit's looking just as good as any other city. The suburbs need some work. I'm not talking about the suburbs like Alan, what you and I grew up in. I'm talking about, suburbs actually, the ones that are still Detroit. Those are still going to need some work.
Yeah. Yeah, you talk about that website. I always was like, played the game. Is it Beirut or is it Detroit?
Yeah, that's right. Well, some places in Detroit still do look like Beirut circa 1985.
Yeah.
I'll grant that. But like I said, over the past 10 years, I'm impressed. And I think once you're in the ashes, you can only come out of it. So.
Oh, it's true. No, I hope it comes back. And a lot was going on good in at least the last few years. The economy was upticking. Like you said, a lot of people were buying real cheap. And finally things were showing that, hey, now we can invest in this property. I want to see that come back. I don't think anybody saw a worldwide pandemic. We're not going to dive into that in this. Everybody's already had enough of it. But I do want to see the city come back because it's where I grew up. I kind of think of it as, even though Atlanta's my home, I mean, I was literally born in Detroit. I mean, on my birth certificate, I was born in the freaking heart of the Motor City, My parents moved out after a few years, but I was in Detroit.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that about coming from Detroit. I was just telling my wife the other day that you never got rid of the Midwest accent. You don't have I would never know that you've been living in the South most of your life.
No, my formative years were all just in time before I moved. Now I can put one on and I play with voices all the time. Ask Walt, I drive him nuts, but it's
not
great.
Just with voices.
No, it's he puts a steering wheel down his pants so I can drive him nuts.
And cut.
And scene.
And
cut,
we're
print,
out.
check the gate. So let's talk about while you were doing this. We both have been writers most of our lives. I have not done what you've done though. So you are already well past that milestone. A lot of people say to themselves, I'm going to sit down and write a book. I don't care if it's a shitty book. I'm going to start it and I'm going to finish it. And I'm going to say, at least I wrote one. I always end up stopping because I write myself into corners or I get bored with it or I realize I haven't thought it all the way through. I can't say that about you. You've got 2 published novels. Let's take the first one, 3 Condoms for Sarah.
Yeah, that's my very first book. Imagine what my mom thought after she read it. I didn't even know she was reading it. She just says, I got your book and I finished it and it was pretty good.
Tell us what was the genesis behind that? Because it's kind of a quirky novel.
Yeah, well, okay. I was single at the time when I started writing it.
It doesn't come through that novel at all.
Yeah, right. I know. In fact, a friend of mine, he's like, yeah, when you were writing that, you were sort of in a headspace. You were a real peach back then. I'm like, yeah, okay. So no, I was single at the time. I was approaching 30 and I didn't really care much for that. I was like, I really saw myself being happily married at this point. Maybe, I don't know, maybe kid, maybe not. And here I am, totally single. My fiance had left me at the time. It was a mutual thing. It's like, hey, we're just better friends. We shouldn't get married. So I was just in this headspace. So I just started writing the story about this guy who can't find a girlfriend. So instead of a lot of people were saying, do this online dating, get, set up a profile. I refused to do that. I never wanted to do that, but I would browse them. And I started finding them real interesting. I'm like, people are really selling themselves. And I started noticing patterns. So I would write out these patterns. And then I decided, what if I put up an ad instead of making myself look good? How about I make myself look absolutely awful and jaded and see what happens? So I put up this ad, and the ad's in the book. Actually, the exact ad that's in the book is harsher, only because a friend of mine who read it said, you should make it harder. You should make it worse. But that ad in one form, actually, I put it up online, and the responses I got were great. So I started writing them down, and I was like, okay, what if this guy ends up getting contacted by the wrong kind of woman who keeps him in the friend zone, but she ends up doing something? What's going to be the big thing she puts him through? I couldn't figure out what to do. So I also, at the time, met the woman who is now my wife. So I lost that jadedness. And to write that book, I needed some angst. I ended up finishing it when I was going through cancer, because that was now my angst. So it took about 15 years to finish.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, because I was going to get on the cancer thing at some point, but I didn't want to interrupt the creative flow, because a lot of authors I've interviewed said it's the first one that really is the hardest. You learn the most. You learn whether or not you can finish. You either power through or you just give up. Yeah. I'm still in the give up camp. I have yet to be able to figure out how to get one finished. How did it feel when you got it done?
I remember going out with friends to a bar, and I remember having a little too much to drink because I was in party mode. I didn't think I'd ever finish it, but literally when I figured out what the catalyst was going to be, basically the title 3 Condoms for Sarah is because the character David meets this girl named Sarah, and he thinks maybe I now have a shot with somebody. So he buys a small 3-pack of condoms. And I started thinking, this is in the origin of the book, what if this character ends up using all 3 of them, but never on her? And they're always in a weird, strange way.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the sort of the idea of the story. Now, I've always loved Tarantino's From Dusk Till Dawn, and because right in the middle, it changes into a completely different movie. And I was like, I'm going to do that one day. And I believe in chapter 11 is where I managed to do that. Because people usually talk to me and tell me that they really like the book, but when they get on chapter 11, they stop talking to me.
That's not a good sign normally.
Well, because I don't think they know what to say. I mean, I've gotten really good feedback about the book, but they'll generally talk about the beginning of the book, but then they're like, then there's that ending there.
Yeah. What's going on with Eric?
Yeah.
Well, at least you have one complete. And then along the way, obviously, while this was a 15-year endeavor, and what I was telling Walt was, you are big in and I think it's more from the fascination, not necessarily a hardcore belief in, but UFOlogy. Yeah, that's right. I'm a skeptic in the sense that I don't believe there's flying saucers out there or flying triangles. If there's anything at all, it's experimental aircraft that we know nothing about. In fact, a few years ago, the CIA, they tweeted, I thought this was one of my favorite tweets from the CIA. They said, yeah, remember all those flying saucers in the 50s and 60s? That was us.
I remember that tweet. I had a couple of friends go bananas over that tweet.
Yeah, because it was, the SR-71 and all the spy planes that have now been declassified. But the whole concept of the flying saucer, the UFOs, the whole subject matter is just absolutely fascinating because, well, Alan, you and I come from a science fiction background. So Star Wars we grew up with, and the whole concept of meeting aliens and elsewhere. So what happened was I'm really young, maybe 5, 6, 7, and my dad's watching In Search Of. I think we all got started at our age. I think we all got started with In Search Of. And so here's the story of UFOs and the possibility that aliens are actually coming here. I mean, when I find out somebody has never looked into UFOs or ghosts or Bigfoot, I'm like, how did you spend your childhood? Because that seems like something every kid goes through.
Yeah.
So
did you not watch The $6 Million Man?
Yeah.
Where he Have you not read Beyond and Back? Have you not, anything that Leonard Nimoy was on?
Yeah.
I mean, all that stuff when we were growing up, I'm a little bit older than y'all, but not much. But, going through the 70s and into the 80s, there was a real fascination with the paranormal. I remember tons of shows on the Bermuda Triangle. And
there was a movie in the theater that was about the Bermuda Triangle. It was all of us. It was like a big giant In Search of. It. We went to go see it.
Yeah, I remember that. And there was one on reincarnation. I mean, there was all that stuff that we feasted on back then.
Yeah, it's actually all of it's coming back now thanks to History Channel's Ancient Aliens, because now there's all these ghost hunter shows, and there was 10 seasons of Finding Bigfoot, where after 10 seasons they still never found Bigfoot. There's just a whole ton of paranormal shows out there now, and it's funny that it's History Channel and yet actually going down that path.
Yeah, the History Channel really needs to think of a name change.
Well, it's another subject for a different day. I wanted to ask then, because you had a fascination, you're a skeptic, but you're still fascinated by it in terms of what is the mythos and why does it keep coming up? And it led to a second book.
Yeah, Chasing Disclosure. In the UFO community, what the word disclosure means is they're waiting for the government or anybody who knows to come forward and say, we know, and they're here, disclosing it. So I call it Chasing Disclosure because what I wanted to do was just basically write a book about everything I knew about UFOs. Basically, here's the way I like to say it. What James Cameron did with Titanic is what I'd like to think I did with the subject of UFOs. You took these real stories, but you put fake characters in it to tell that story. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to write a book that UFO people who like ufology would really enjoy, because they'd be like, I remember that case and I know that case. I know exactly what he's talking about there. But for people who maybe didn't know anything about it, to still enjoy it. A good science fiction book.
Yeah, that's your most recent one.
My most recent one's actually coming out September 11th.
Okay, well,
and that one,
I was going to get to what you're working on. So you can't say it's my most recent one if it's not freaking out yet.
Right.
I only have two on my shelf with the name Eric Wojciechowski on the spine, okay? So.
Oh, that's nice of you.
Well, so far you're beating me 2-0, and you may now it's going to be 3-0.
I have been bothering. In fact, I stopped bothering you. I used to tag you.
I know
on Novel Writing Month in November. I used to tag you for years, and I just stopped doing that. I'm like,
you can keep tagging me. It always makes me feel guilty for about a day and a half.
Well, yeah. Well, just remember, if you're writing something and you're bored of it, then your reader's going to be bored of it. So, but I never recommend throwing anything out. Like Stephen King threw away his first draft of Carrie. And it was only because his wife took it out of the trash and said, why don't you just wait? And if his wife hadn't done that, we wouldn't have Carrie. So you never know, because there are some chapters in Chasing Disclosure that I actually wrote for a completely different book. That book fizzled out because I couldn't get into the story. And if I, as a writer, can't get into the story, I can't expect my reader to. But there's a couple of chapters that I just changed the names and a few details that now fit in this story. So I always recommend don't throw anything away.
It's really good advice. And it's amazing if you do have one of those. I think you and we talked about this before. I think we have similar ways of working and processing. It's almost like you've got the unconscious constantly working. And all of a sudden when it peeks through and breaks through the floor into your conscious mind, you're like, oh, hey, I've got this idea. And you realize, how did I have all this worked out? Well, you didn't. Is like your dreams were working on it. Your unconscious was working on it. I wasn't freaking working on it.
Well, actually, all writing, in my opinion, is never really done at the typewriter. You're writing when you're at the gym. You're writing when you're thinking of a story. You're writing when you're on the couch, when you're dreaming, of course. There's a couple parts in, first of all, the way that I ended 3 Condoms for Sarah, as well as the way that I ended Chasing Disclosure, I didn't plan on those endings. I had no idea what I was going to do. In fact, at the end of Chasing Disclosure, basically what the story's about is it begins with a plane crash. And the plane comes down looking like it's a crumpled tin can, as if something squeezed it in the air. And the only one who is conscious the whole time is this little 7-year-old girl named Jacqueline Vincent. The other 2 that were conscious were the pilots, but they're forbidden to talk because of all the lawsuits the airline's going to come into. So the main character tries to get a hold of this little girl to find out what happened. And through the whole thing, he starts getting this sense that she's an alien abductee, somebody who's constantly being abducted out of her bed by extraterrestrials. And so the way that the book is leading up to some event is happening, and this little girl keeps saying, they tell me that I'm almost done. They keep telling me that they're almost done with me, and then they're going to be finished. And the main character is like, what is going to happen at the end? So I kept trying to figure out how I was going to end this book. Does she end up missing, and does she get abducted, or does nothing happen at all? And I felt those two, I painted myself into a corner because I felt that the reader could predict both of those. The ending that I finally went with, nobody's been able to figure it out, and most readers haven't forgiven me. not because it's bad, but because they didn't see it coming.
But that's good.
And my mother, she texted me when she was done with the book, and she says, I can't stop bawling my eyes out.
Oh, good. Aw, Ma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because of disappointment, or because she liked it so much?
I can't believe I birthed this child.
Yeah. Because, but the way that I ended it, I felt like I was, I contacted a couple other writers, and I'm like, have you ever thrown a stone so hard at one of your characters that you feel bad you did it? And they're like, oh yeah, we do it all the time, but that's exactly what gets the reader. So I'm like, okay, then I'm going with this ending. And nobody's been able to predict it. I'm still very satisfied with it.
That's awesome.
Just to take you down a small rabbit trail.
Yeah.
So, as we were saying, over the years, the UFOlogy movement has been growing and changing and morphing through time. When you look at what's out there right now and what people are pushing out to the public and speculating on, or some people, coming forward and saying, oh yeah, this is definitely happening. What are your thoughts on that whole movement and what's going on there? Do you think most of those people are just attention hounds, or do you think there's something going on and they just don't really know what it is? What are your thoughts on that whole movement?
Are you talking about December 2017 when those 3 videos came out from the Navy, and that's what people are continuing to talk about?
Well, I know that kind of fueled the fire for some people, and you always have, if you scroll through Netflix, just type in UFO, and there are tons and tons and tons that range from I was abducted and had their baby to
right.
Former government employees coming out and going, oh, this is definitely real, and we're having first contact. That goes back to the Area 51 stuff. So what are your thoughts on all that? I'm probably the world's biggest skeptic on all that. But for the people who really buy into it, what are your thoughts on why that movement continues and why so many people buy into it so hard?
I think it continues the same reason why astrology or ghosts or Bigfoot continues. It's the poster I've got up on my wall right now, the one from the X-Files. I want to believe. You want it so bad that when one case looks great and it turns out to be a hoax, you move on to the next case. And then what people will do is they'll say, well, there's so many sightings out there and so much contact that even if half of it's a hoax, they think that then means that the other stuff is real, but it doesn't. There could be misinterpretations. I mean, have you ever looked into the sky and you're like, I have no idea what that is right there, but look at that thing.
Oh, sure.
It doesn't mean you saw an extraterrestrial.
Yeah. I mean, when I left the Grateful Dead concert in '93, man, I can't tell you the crap I was seeing.
That's right.
Yeah, now that it may be a little different in terms of context, but
different but similar.
Yeah. Okay. I
do think you're right, though, Eric. I think there is I hate to use a big term here, but there's a zeitgeist that exists for people who want to believe in something that they can't explain. Some people will. I think everyone has their own religion, whether it is actual religion or they pick something else to fill that. I think mankind has this innate need to have something unexplained and then spend their life trying to explain it. It feels like we're always chasing. We're tilting at the windmill thinking it's a dragon. And I think some people really want to believe there's something bigger and greater out there.
Oh, yeah. Well, think about the joke that I like to say is that the religion for atheists is probably UFOs and Bigfoot, because that's the only other. Because
Nessie.
that's what Yeah, that's what Ancient Aliens is. It's basically, ancient man mistook their gods for space travelers. It's almost like another religion. It's just another way. You still got some gods out there. We still got some extraterrestrials. Something's going to save us. Walt, I think you said something about government officials coming out and saying that the phenomenon is real and so forth. You got to remember that just because they're from the government doesn't necessarily mean that they know. Like people have asked me, you think Trump knows? I'm like, if he did, he would tweet it.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
No,
well, and I was just saying, my dad was with the government for 25 years. I can tell you, we'd know if he knew. So,
yeah, there is a really good book out. The name eludes me, but one of the writers' father worked for Area 51, and he said that Dad told me, this is spycraft. We don't have aliens there, and so forth.
which just goes to show, I mean, that's like what you would say if you were trying to cover up that there are really aliens there, right? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, I can't hear you guys at all.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
How do we restart the meeting?
We don't.
Or just keep talking?
And can you hear us?
I can.
Look at that.
I just upgraded my internet in January to like the second from fastest that they had to offer. And now look at what happens.
So you know what I said while you couldn't hear us? He should not have been talking about the government and aliens. They have decided that's it.
That's right.
Pull the plug. They've been monitoring this call. And by the way, this is a Chinese company that runs Zoom, so obviously they've completely decided we got to pull the plug on this guy. So, all right. So, what was the last thing you remember us saying? Because you were answering about people in government. They don't know everything. And then Walt, you said, "Yeah, my dad was FBI 25 years. If he had known something, we would have known it."
Yeah, we would know. So
yeah. What I try to tell people is that why are you waiting for government to give you the answer? If aliens or another now interdimensional travelers or whatever, if they're really here, why would government have the answer? Anybody could have the answer. Elon Musk will probably have the answer. So
that explains how he built his SpaceX. Oh my God, that's exactly how he did it.
It all ties together.
I'm convinced that Elon Musk is just our next Bond villain, and we don't know it yet. But
we know it.
Think about it. He's got his own spaceships. Okay, he's tunneling underground in California. He's got flamethrowers. It's right there. It's just right there. All he has to do is decide.
Oh my God. No, Mr. Bond, I want you to die.
Right.
Well, I love the fact that he has flamethrowers. That is awesome. Like I will join his bad guy group just to do that.
Yeah, he's even got his own car. It's right there, man. I'm not the only one who sees it.
So let's pull back in because we're getting to the segment where we're running out of our guest time. I want to get to your third novel, kind of talk about it, especially since we'll be able to tease its release coming up in a few months.
Yeah.
During the course of both book one and then definitely during the course of book two, you had a huge 2 times medical life-changing event that happened to you. And the thing that actually, I think, took your dad at a very young age.
Yes.
So what was, if you talk for a moment, if you will, because you are a survivor and you stayed positive,
Yeah.
But it was weird. You went through cancer twice.
Yeah, actually, it was the same bout of cancer, but there was a spot on my liver that wasn't growing and it didn't look like it was doing anything and it could have been benign. So my oncologist was really on it, like MRIs and PET scans. Let's find out what this is. But basically in 2012, I went for a regular physical. I was feeling as fine as I do now. There was nothing wrong with me as far as I could tell. I was just for my regular physical. I figured my doc would tell me lose a little bit of weight and I'll see you next year. But instead, I had my blood work was all off. And I went in for colonoscopy because she says, I think you're bleeding internally. And I'm like, oh, really? I go in for a colonoscopy and they find a stage 2 tumor in my colon. So I go under the knife, 5 weeks recovery, and then I go through the summer of 2012 in chemo. And that's, Alan, also when I hit you up and I was like, I got nothing else to do while I'm on chemo, so why don't we do a blog? And then I finished the first book, 3 Condoms for Sarah, and then I was all done. In 2013, we were just monitoring. And then probably because I was off chemo 2013, that's when the spot on the liver started to grow. It had actually been a metastasis from the colon. So it was really just one bout of cancer, but I had to undergo treatment twice and 2 surgeries. I've had 50% of my liver removed and I've test driven the thing. And I'm telling you, I can still drink you under the table.
Well, livers grow back. That's the good thing.
Right.
Well, you and I, we can talk about our drinking each under the table. It depends which side of the single malt Scotch spectrum you're on. See, you drink the Absorbine Junior used bandage flavor. I tend to be more on the oak barrel high end flavor. So,
yeah.
Let me remind you of what kind of amateurs y'all are.
as he brings out the moonshine.
Moonshine. Oh, I'm not above moonshine. I'm not above it at all. If I have a preference, the smokier the better. I love that peat taste. My preference is Ardbeg.
Yeah, I know. You had me try something like, God, it's like, I'm serious. It's like somebody took a gangrene bandage and wrung it out. I'm like, oh,
it tastes like a campfire. It does.
It tastes like cancer. Which, by the way, you credited that crap with what killed you. Like, if I can drink this and I don't die, the cancer is certainly not getting me.
Well, I survived 2 summers of chemo and 2 surgeries, and I am, as of this summer, 6.5 years with no problems.
That's awesome.
Wow, that's great.
That's congratulations.
Yeah, in fact, thanks. I just saw my oncologist for my 6-month checkup and blood work this past Thursday, and everything is looking really good. So I'm doing good.
Good. You need to stay alive and kicking because we got lots of kayaking and visiting and lots still to write and discuss and argue and have fun over and lots of drinking to do.
Yeah.
Let's get to your third book quickly as we begin because we're catching now up to present time.
Yeah.
We try to do this with all of our guests, set the stage on who they are, where they came from, and now what they're doing. You already said you may retire in the next 4 or 5 years from what you do as a day job.
Yeah.
But as far as author, you can do that the rest of your life. So tell us a little bit about this third book, kind of tease it and where we can start to look for it as we head into, I don't know, maybe pre-holiday planning season.
Yeah, well, after the first novel, because it took so long, I said, okay, I've got the novel thing out of the way. I'm not going to do another one. It was only a couple years later that I started going, you know what? I'm going to write about UFOs. I wanted to write a book about UFOs for a long time, but I didn't want to do nonfiction. I wanted to give something new. So by the time I was done with Chasing Disclosure, I was like, okay, I'm done. That's 2 novels now, and it does take a lot of work and a lot out of you. And then I started thinking, well, how about instead of another novel, how about I get a collection of short stories together? And what if they are based off the universe I created in Chasing Disclosure? And so this new one coming out is a collection of short stories, but it's based on the universe that I created. And this one's called Chasing Magic. Now, the reason it's called Chasing Magic is Arthur C. Clarke once said that any advanced civilization, their technology is going to look like magic to us. And so that's basically what it is we don't know. The characters in the book Chasing Disclosure don't really know what the UFOs are, but they're like magic. So this one's called Chasing Magic, and the cover art is currently being designed. My wife has read it, and she's made her edits. And she's my first reader, first editor, and has to pass her test. And then I might get my cover art in the next couple of weeks. And I've scheduled it for September 11th release. And it has nothing to do with what we think about 9/11, but that's the first day of Michigan's 3rd UFO conference, where I'm going to be vending. And I figure I'm going to have it available there.
Excellent. So folks up in the upper Midwest, or they go to these different conferences, depending if they're already in that sort of, in that culture, they'll probably already know about the event. But if as long as it's allowed to happen, I know Atlanta's planning to have all their conventions still in the fall if they want to have them. That's all still moving forward. So I hope that happens for you, because that's a huge place to be able to reach fans directly, author to reader, and sign autographs, take pictures, and dude, that is fantastic.
Yeah, thanks.
Eric, how are your books received in that world?
They're doing really well. I've yet to meet somebody who likes UFOlogy that read it and said, I don't like your book. But I also don't know much about sales, especially at conventions, because here's what I do when I go to cons and I'm vending. People buy my book and they give me cash. And then I immediately go out to the other vendors and I buy their stuff. So I may bring a book of boxes to vend and sell almost all of those. And I'll look and be like, oh, I only got $50 here. But I got all these great T-shirts and statues. So I don't.
I got an autograph poster of Bigfoot.
Yeah. Okay. I had Chasing Disclosure for the first Michigan UFO Con. That sold really well. And then when I returned this past year, I had a lot of people who bought it, who read it, who came to see me to talk about it. And they all really liked it. Then they started asking me when the next one's coming out, because I had promised it last year, but I got caught up doing other things. So I said, I'm going to have it this year. So my table was promptly displayed with coming in 2020. That way I had no excuses. I have to deliver.
So it's done. It's just looking for final proof.
Yeah.
Graphics, but you're going to be ready for September 11th, the third annual UFO Con in Michigan.
Yes. Yep. Excellent.
All right, folks, mark your calendars. If you want to make a day trip up there or whatever, if you're a fan of UFOs, check it out online. It's actually a really interesting culture within the United States, or around the world, actually, the whole ufologist. Eric, before we move into our next segment, I know you said you told us before we started you'd want to hang out. Where can people learn more about your book? Reach out to you? Are you on social media? Do you have a public page? How do you engage? How do you let people know where to find you?
I'm mainly on Twitter. I don't get on as much as I used to. Sometimes what'll happen is if I'll have an hour to kill in the evening, you'll just see a flight of just this, and then days will go by and I don't get on it. Facebook I'm on as well. That's a little bit harder I don't use that one as much. But I do have my own website, ericwojo.wordpress.com. That's where you'll find other writings, not just my books, but blogs. I have a recommend section, books that I really like that I think somebody else would like. Some free stories are up there. Some of them not really PG. And then an about section, which has a little bit more about me. But yeah, my books are on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere books are sold.
Excellent. So ericwojo.wordpress.com. It makes it a lot easier than trying to tell people to spell Wojciechowski.
Right. Yeah. That's. So anyhow, I know that's why I went with Wojo.
Exactly. I am so happy you were able to join us. I know you want to hang out. We're going to do some news. We're going to talk about, and actually, when we get to the recommendations, you might want to refresh that or pull that list up. You might have some books that you'll be able to throw out there for our listeners. Walt, we're at the point where we're going to dive into some news, and it's got to be true because, we found it online. But we always like to have a little bit of fun, and we never share what each other has discovered for this week. So I always let you open. What's our first news item?
Well, again, I wrestled back and forth with which one to start with, but I'm going to start with Boston, Massachusetts. 6 eBay executives and employees charged with sending threats, a bloody pig mask to a non-fan of eBay.
Oh, I think I heard this, that it was a concerted effort to go after someone who wrote a bad review or something.
You got it. So CBS Boston reports that 6 former eBay employees and executives are facing federal charges after they allegedly led a cyberstalking campaign against a Knickknack, Massachusetts couple they believed was critical of the company in an online e-commerce newsletter. U.S. attorneys said that eBay employees' harassment included sending a couple of disturbing deliveries that included a bloody pig mask, a box of live cockroaches, and get this, a funeral wreath. The employees also allegedly sent anonymous threatening messages and traveled to Massachusetts to conduct covert surveillance of the victims.
Jeez.
Yeah, this is hardcore. It was a determined, systematic effort of senior employees of a major company to destroy the lives of a couple in Tic-Tac, all because they published content about the company that the executives did not like. James Baugh, 45, of San Jose, California, eBay's founding director of safety and security, and former eBay director of global resilience, David Harville, 48, of New York City, were among the 6 charged. Also charged were Stephanie Pop, 32, of San Jose, and a litany of other executives.
No, wait a minute. One of the lead guys was his safety and security, and he thought the way to handle somebody who was writing negative reviews was to online stalk and threaten them.
Yeah, and he's also a former police officer.
Oh, no!
So Pop was eBay's senior manager of global intelligence. Stockwell was the company's manager of global intelligence of the Global Intelligence Center. Zay was a contractor who worked in the intelligence analysis unit, and Gilbert was a senior manager of special operations for eBay's global security team. Gilbert is a former police officer. Oh, not only that, former police captain.
Wow.
He knew better. So skip it down a little bit. Lelling said the Tic-Tac couple serves as editor and publisher for an online newsletter that covers e-commerce companies. According to prosecutors, members of eBay's executive leadership team followed the newsletter and took issue with the content and anonymous comments under the stories. In 2019, 2 members of the newsletter team allegedly sent or forwarded a text message saying it was time to take down the newsletter's editor. One of the messages said the group wanted to crush this lady, referring to the editor. And look, this isn't like a small company of rednecks somewhere. This
isn't Bubba Redneck living in the swamp catching gators and stuff going, we're going to teach you a lesson.
I mean, this is like a major corporation.
Is eBay.
Yeah, this is eBay.
As you were reading off that list of things that they were doing, I couldn't help but think of that line in Animal House when Dean Wormer is talking to Greg and he's reading off the list of offenses that Delta House does.
Who dumped a whole truckload of fizzies into the swim meet? Who delivered the medical school cadavers to the alumni dinner? Every Halloween, the trees are filled with underwear. Every spring, the toilets explode.
You're talking about Delta, sir.
Of course I'm talking about Delta, you twerp! This year it's going to be different. This year we're going to grab the bull by the balls and kick those punks off campus.
What do you intend to do, sir? Delta's already on probation.
They are?
Yes, sir.
Oh. Then as of this moment, they're on double secret probation.
Who dropped the truckload of fizzies in the swim meet? Who delivered the medical school cadavers to the alumni dinner? And he's just
who put cherry bombs in the women's restroom?
Right. The trees are filled with underwear. Every Halloween, the toilets explode. I'm like, you must be talking about Delta House.
Yeah, this is basically Delta House. So,
oh wow.
So get this: when asked if further charges could be filed against the executives, Lelling said the investigation is active and ongoing. 2 unnamed executives are included in the complaint, and they have roles above the highest ranked person here. So they still got more to come. He's quoted as saying, I don't think I would characterize the conduct as rogue because as seen in the complaint, the directive to do something about this goes pretty high up the chain within eBay. The couple then received a host of deliveries aimed at intimidating them. These deliveries including fly larvae, live spiders, a box of cockroaches, a sympathy wreath on the occasion of the death of a loved one, so basically threatening to kill somebody, a book of advice on how to survive the death of a spouse.
Oh my God.
Yeah, pornography mailed to their next door neighbors, but in the couple's name. I'm sorry, that's really not funny, but kind of funny.
Jim, Martha, we got a brown paper package that was wrapped, and we thought we just deliver it, and we don't want to talk to you anymore.
Whatever you do, don't shake hands. So,
Backdoor sluts 9. What?
Halloween masks featuring the face of a bloody pig, the pig fetus, which a pig's fetus was ordered for them, and after the inquiry by the supplier, thankfully was never sent. People were encouraged to knock on the couple's door anytime, day or night. All of the employees were fired by eBay following the investigation. Lelling said the company cooperated with investigators. So, don't mess with eBay.
The lesson here.
The lesson here is eBay is awesome.
We love eBay, as we are saying this on our microphones.
So, and I know this is not reflective of eBay. Good company. That was just a rogue bunch of weirdos.
Yeah, all it takes is just a handful of folks. You know what? It's always fun to make fun of people who break the law, especially when they get caught. And I've got the next story for that.
Oh, boy.
Look, here's just a good... here from the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge, a little bit of a public service announcement. If you're going to steal something, make sure you don't get caught. But better yet...
Wait a minute. That's not the advice.
No. But better yet, don't leave your keys at the scene of the crime.
Oh, gosh.
Yes, I've got one of these stories. A dumb criminal. It sounds crazy, but that's exactly what this guy did. And if you've left your keys at the scene of the crime, have the good common sense to say, I'll just get new ones made. No, don't turn back up at the scene of the crime asking if anyone's seen your keys, because that's exactly what happened here. He came back saying, hey, y'all find a set of keys in the crime scene? I'm missing them. It was 3:50 in the morning on Sunday when a woman called police to tell that her husband had just caught a man breaking into the garage. Once the cops made it to the scene, they arrested the suspect. During the arrest on the way to being taken to custody, the suspect kicked one of the officers. Police investigated and determined the suspect had broken into the garage earlier that night. He had stolen 2 bicycles, a laptop, and a bar fridge. Now, according to police, the suspect hid the items that he stole nearby when then returned to his apartment. And that's when he realized, crap, I can't get into my own damn place. Where are my keys? So he decided he had to go back. And at that point, the door was closed, so he had to smash the glass door of the apartment building so he could get inside to go get into the garage, and that's when he got himself caught. Now, police report the suspect was intoxicated and in breach of 2 conditions of an undertaking. The 20-year-old Brandon man was arrested for breaking and entering and theft, and 2 counts of failure to comply with an undertaking, 2 counts of mischief to property under $5,000, and for assaulting a police officer. So, once again, tip of the day, folks, if you're going to steal something, make sure you don't get caught. But if you lose your keys, don't return to the scene of the crime.
Oh, my gosh. Well, have I ever told you the story? You know, my dad worked bank robberies for years.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes in to interview one of the people who had just been robbed, one of the folks who works behind the counter. So he's interviewing the lady, and he says, well, has he been in here before? She says, well, I don't know. I've never seen him before. Well, do you have any idea who he is? Well, I think so. And she hands him the robbery note that says, I want all your money, put it in this bag. It is a deposit slip. So, being the great investigator my dad is, he says, this is what we call a clue. So they go out and knock on the door of the lady whose name is on the deposit slip. The lady opens the door and he says, hi, I'm with the FBI. And she says, what did he do now?
That might be clue number 2.
So they caught up with the mastermind, and they come walking in and, walking into his apartment. And he says, you're not here to arrest me for the bank robbery, are you? He's probably getting out about now.
And that would be clue number 3.
Yes, there you go. That's the trifecta.
Wow. Don't you love dumb criminals? I mean, Eric, I know you can't talk about your current people, but I bet you have a share. I bet there's a whole book waiting to be written when you're done with your days as a probation officer.
Well, yeah, oh God. Yeah. I've got some stories. The only thing that I'll say is this. A few years ago, a friend's wife says, Eric, tell me some of the worst things that you've been part of, some of the worst investigations. And so I proceeded to tell her. And when I was done, she said, I never want you to tell me about your job again. And to this day, at least once a year when we all get together, she'll come up to me and be like, please don't talk about your work tonight.
Look, we've got new friends. They just moved in. We're trying to impress them. Please don't say anything. Talk about being an author.
Yeah. No, I mean, some of the stories that they'll tell you, one of my favorites was when a guy got busted for selling drugs. He said, oh, I knew it was an undercover cop. I'm like, so then why would you sell? He says, well, I wanted to show my kids what happens when you get involved in this. And I said, you think the judge is going to buy that? And so
I
he
was
goes
just trying to be an effective role model for my children.
Dad of the year. And yeah. And
watch
so
this, children.
So he comes back the next month after sentencing and he gets his probation term. And I said, so how'd the judge like your story? He goes, my attorney saw it and struck it immediately. The judge never saw it.
Wise man.
Oh, hell no.
Wise man.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So.
Well, I keep telling my dad he's got to write a book for the same reason. I mean, just so many things. But
I don't think I'm going to ever write a book on what I do. But I will say in the new book coming out, Chasing Magic, I do have a character who's on probation. And so I've written a few things like that, but I don't think I'm actually going to write a book about what I did.
Well, I didn't mean like an autobiography or anything. I meant taking some of those stories and running with them.
Oh yeah, maybe I could do that. But the closest that the department doesn't really want us, like if we ever write something, it's got to be, this is my opinion, this isn't policy. And when I used to write letters to the editor, I never would go after the state government or anything. The federal government has always been my, what I criticize most.
Easy.
So yeah. So because I'm a state employee, I stayed with the federal. So back in the 90s, when I was lucky enough that the Port Huron newspaper would pick up a lot of my opinions, every time I was in the paper, my boss would come out of his office and be like, you didn't write about us, did you? I'm like, no.
No, sir. No, sir.
I'm like, nope. I just called President Clinton a criminal. I didn't write about the DOC at all. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'm fine.
Carry on.
I got a key to the jail. I'll just let myself in now. Show me my room.
Fine work, Otis.
Right.
Fine work, Otis. Nice.
Well, I guess we'll move on to our next, I want to say news. I don't know what this is. So this is from Creative Loafing Tampa. While looking for a Frisbee, a Tampa Bay man was bit in the face by an alligator, says the police.
Okay. It's just funny the way you read it. See, normally if my wife heard, she's like, oh my God, a man got bit by an alligator while he was going for a Frisbee. Walt reads like, check this out. This dude got bit by an alligator going for a Frisbee.
Print it. It's in. This is for
it's
Tuesday.
All on your tone.
This is in the podcast. Congratulations, dumbass.
How bad did he want that Frisbee?
Oh, you'll know in just a second.
Okay.
Local wildlife officials are searching for an alligator. Jesus Christ.
Wait a minute. Wait, hold on. I gotta catch my breath.
I knew I could not get through that first sentence.
Okay. All right. Breathe.
Walt talking, take two. Local wildlife officials are searching for
I can't do it.
Local wildlife officials are searching for an alligator that bit a man directly in the face. Largo Police Department spokesman Lieutenant Scott Gore told Creative Loafing Tampa Bay that Travis Spitzer, local dumbass, was in waist-deep water at Taylor Lake on Friday, July 12th at around 5 a.m. looking for a Frisbee when the alligator bit him in the face. He used his left hand to pry himself free and as a result had lacerations to his face and hands, said Gore. He was transported for medical care and is expected to recover. FWC is responding for the gator. The incident comes as Florida is at the peak of alligator mating season, which often runs from May to July, depending on temperatures. During this period, it is not uncommon to see alligators roaming around and being more active, say the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. So, if you throw your frisbee in the water, don't be a spitzer.
During alligator mating season.
My favorite part of that was the whole 5 a.m.
Yes, well, it doesn't mention it, but let's just assume that alcohol is probably involved.
Well, if you're throwing the frisbee, like, did he throw the frisbee around at 9 o'clock at night? And then he woke up. He's like, I still haven't got it back. Or
Yeah, he's
was
still-
woke up at 3 a.m. It's
Like-
killing me. I know it's got to be around here somewhere.
that was my first thought. It's like, okay, so it was if it's the night before.
Oh, I didn't think to look in the lake. Maybe that's where it is.
I don't know Travis Spitzer, but I think you guys may be giving him too much credit.
All right. Well, I have got our last story, and this one, that phrase, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned."
Too well.
Do we all recognize that? We all have wives, right? So, we never know how someone's going to react when someone dies. The truth of the matter is, we all deal with death differently. Well, let's go into one particular version of how someone deals with it. For most people, there's a good amount of sadness, some regret, maybe a lot of wishing they could go back for a second, maybe say one more goodbye. Not for the person we're going to talk about today. In fact, some people don't mourn, and in the case of this abusive husband's death, the wife was not sad at all. When this not-so-loved one passed away, the widowed wife took matters into her own hands, literally. After her husband died, Marcia Widener grabbed her cell phone, began filming a video where she decided to share to the world exactly what she thought of her ex and what she was going to do with his ashes, saying, quote,
Oh,
"I know you're not going to understand why I'm doing this," then showing a box filled with ashes to the camera, showing the late Don Widener's remains. His family don't want him. His brother doesn't want him around. His kids don't even want him. Actually, they want him to go right in the gutter or maybe flush him down the toilet. Marcia shares that Don was in fact a garbage man for a living and so went to the local landfill to film this particular episode. She begins to untie the garbage bag with his remains, saying, "This is for all the pain and all the turmoil he's caused my children and myself, and for what he calls his parents. This is his goodbye." And then she starts pouring his ashes into a trash bin. "This is for all the times he kicked me in the head. Yup, he put my head through a window," she said, spilling his ashes all over the ground, ending with, "Adios, amigo." There you go.
Gosh.
Sharing for our internet social media world just what she thought of her ex-husband, or with the passing of her now deceased husband.
But if he was that brutal, committing acts of domestic violence, I can understand that.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, no doubt.
100%.
And
well,
in fact, I'm surprised she didn't do something nastier.
But the fact
Well,
that
and I
she
was gonna
chose
say
to
that-
film it and narrate it, it's like, because y'all don't understand why I'm doing this, let me explain.
Well, in the cremation, very well have covered evidence.
Well, it's always possible.
You know, it reminds me of what's her character actress, Margot Martindale. You know, I could just picture her doing this right here in the season 2 of Justified.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that's it. That's it for the news. I just thought that I read it like, oh hell, I gotta read that one. That one's just too good. I can't
is a
pass it
great
up. All right, well, let's quickly move as we're starting to go a little over time, but that's all right. There's not like we have a gun to our heads or a sponsor telling us to keep it short. We always like to try to end with what we might have been watching or maybe reading or listening to in the last week since the last episode. So Walt, we won't put Eric quite on the spot. Let him gather his thoughts. What do you got recommendation wise that might be streaming or coming to a theater near you?
Well, I'm reading my list and I'm realizing I need to get out more because I have a long list. There is a great comedy stand-up. Say it! You got bit in the face with an alligator. So, Walt talking take 2. There is a great stand-up show that's on Netflix this week. Patton Oswalt, I referenced that last week. They have an episode 2 that's actually Bob Rabini, who is, Bob Rubin, who is seen as a mentor for a lot of comics and stuff like that. And he has a show called Oddities and Rarities, and it is hysterical. I had to keep stopping and rewinding because I missed stuff. I was laughing so hard. So don't miss that. That's on Netflix. Also, Jerry Seinfeld, he's got a special called 23 Hours to Kill, which is great. It's all new material, and it's classic Jerry. His wife probably killed him when he got home because of some of the stuff. Also, have you seen the movie Extraction?
Not yet, but that's Thor's in that, right?
Thor is in that. He is the main character. Let me tell you, it is the most action-packed movie I've ever seen. And I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Little gory. Don't let the kids, definitely PG-13 or higher. But it is basically, you have 5 minutes of setting the stage for what's going to happen. And then it is 5 million gunshots, knifings, planes blowing up, helicopter crashes. It is awesome.
I heard the stunt work is really impressive. Some of the CG blood work might be a little transparent, but that all in all, I've heard both good and bad. If you like just a kind of a brainless, mindless action movie, Chris Hemsworth is going to be carving himself out as that sort of character after the world of Thor. But that if you're looking for something original or a plot twist that you don't see coming from a mile away, this is not that movie.
This is not that movie. Now, there are some things in it that make you very sympathetic to his character. And at the end, you definitely have an affinity for him and for what he's been through. But it is a great, fun, and like you said, you're not going to think, you're just going to watch.
Just kick back, put some popcorn on, grab a beer or two, and enjoy.
And it is a fun movie. So it's fun. But it's great. It is definitely out of kind of that Schwarzenegger 80s, 90s kind of action movie. And then finally, there's one called American Gospel, and there's some things that probably everybody will find something to disagree with in this. However, it takes a look at these scam artist, TV evangelist, faith healer types, and just takes them apart and shows some of their trickery and stuff like that. So if you're so inclined and would like to find out about some of these whack job charlatans, American Gospel, also on Netflix, is definitely worth watching.
Excellent. Eric, what about you? You a big streaming kind of guy? You got any shows or movies you've been watching in the last week or so that are worth recommending?
My wife and I just finished Penny Dreadful. It's a Showtime. Are you familiar with it? They only did 3 seasons.
Is that with Timothy Dalton, right?
Yes, it is with him. It's a paranormal show. It starts off, they bring in some fictional characters like Dorian Gray and Frankenstein, Dracula.
So it's a documentary.
Isn't it based off a graphic novel or a graphic novel series?
It might be. I haven't really researched it. I was just enjoying the show.
I heard it's actually really good. It's just like, it's dark and quirky, but that's really good.
Yeah. Each season, the same investigators are in it, but there's like a new villain with each season. And it's really good. I really recommend it. And then we just started watching Upload on Amazon. Are you guys familiar with Upload?
Nope.
That popped up as a suggestion for me today, and I have not watched it yet, but that looks pretty good.
Yeah, it's like when you're basically, the premise is as you're coming to the end of your life, they now have the ability to scan your brain and upload you into a computer so you never actually die. And you can now live out when your body dies, your mind can continue to live. And it's actually a comedy, and it's really funny. But I found after about 4 episodes, the comedy was sort of like, okay, I get it. It's like a silly Matrix. All right. So we started watching the new Steve Carell on Netflix, Space Force, which is really good. If you like Steve Carell, you're not going to be disappointed with that.
How far into that are you?
That one's about 4 episodes as well.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So you're a thumbs up for Space Force
so far. Yeah. Well, what's great is that I understand that I can't remember what it was, but I heard that somebody, I think the actual Space Force, was trying to get that show to change its name because it's a comedy. And they won in court. They don't have to change their name because they're just Space Force.
Right. And now the U.S. government has a problem because it's patented or trademarked by Netflix.
Right.
So they may not be able to call it Space Force.
Well, they've already ripped off the Federation flag, the band.
Yeah, they have.
So, I mean, they knew what they were doing.
Well, have you noticed in there yet that when Steve Carell has his camouflage uniform on,
It's stars.
It's stars on one of them, and then the surface of the moon for another.
Yeah, that's right. If you like Steve Carell, it's classic Steve Carell. Like, he's basically playing the same character he did in The Office.
Yes,
Which I thought was great. So, as far as books, I got a couple. I always got one in the living room, one at work, which I haven't been in my office in 3 months now because of COVID. But I'm reading Chuck Wendig's The Wanderers. And then another one I got, because I do a lot of book reviews on Amazon, not on Amazon, well, actually both on Amazon and Goodreads. About once a month or so, I'll get hit up by a new author who says, hey, I read your review of this book and my books like it and you liked it. Can I give you a free copy in exchange for a review? Mm-hmm. And most of the time I turn them down because I don't have time. But this particular one did interest me. It's called The Heir of Ra, as in the sun god from Egypt, by Sazanowski is the author. So I'm pretty impressed with it, which made me start thinking that I think what I might do is take a break from big published books, bestsellers, and try to find an author I don't know nothing about, just read the summary of the book and maybe spend 99 cents and give it a chance, because you never know what gems are out there.
Right.
It's kind of been my project lately.
Well, I mean, technically, you're a small published author as well. You'd love for people to stumble across you.
Oh yeah, there's nothing better than when a complete stranger throws out on Twitter, I just finished your book and it was well worth this or well worth that, and I really liked it. I'm like, oh, that's the greatest thing that's happened to me today. Like, I don't know you. Like, you expect your mom to like it, all right? You expect your friends to at least, lie. Mm-hmm. But there's a couple things that I never do. First is I never ask anybody to read my stuff just because you're my friend. I don't expect that. But I also never ask anybody, what did you think? And the reason why is because if they're friends or family, if they don't like it, they're not going to tell you. They don't want to hurt your feelings. Right. So you may never get a real answer, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot.
I will only mention then one thing that I wanted to see. Some friends of ours over at the podcast 60 Minutes With, they're going through the Clint Eastwood movies, and they had just finished The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and it led them to a documentary that's out that you can check out, and I watched it yesterday, and it was good. It was called Sad Hill Unearthed, and it's about where they shot the ending cemetery scene, the concentric cemetery graves at that movie that had gotten overgrown. 3 different guys whose dads remembered when they were making the movie in Spain, decided they wanted to start maybe clearing a little area. Well, the project grew and grew. An entire documentary was made about it. It got to Clint Eastwood, and when they decided to have a showing of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly at this now massively restored set piece, an outdoor really set piece, Clint Eastwood had recorded a message these guys were taken completely off guard. James Hetfield was actually part of it as well, because Metallica uses Ecstasy of Gold to open so many of their concerts. It's one of the songs that they identify with and kind of get themselves hyped with. It's Ennio Morricone's Ecstasy of Gold. And so that's an iconic part of the movie when that song plays. It was really good. It was subtitled because the guys in Spain didn't speak English, so the whole thing is subtitled when they're talking, and then when it cuts over to American performers or American individuals, it's still subtitled through the whole thing. So I need to go rewatch it because it was so fast in places. I couldn't read as fast as they were talking, but if you have even just a mild interest in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, this documentary is sort of like a side story about these people who were so affected by it because of their parents, and then growing up being fans of Clint Eastwood, decided they were going to clean off the spot they filmed that iconic scene, that ending, and then restored it back to Hollywood level quality, which it's a pretty darn good story.
It is a fantastic documentary.
I haven't seen it.
Sad Hill Unearthed. Check it out. It's on.
Okay.
I believe it's Amazon Prime. Might be Netflix. I can't remember. I've got so many streaming services, hard to remember. But anyways,
I think
out
it's
there.
Amazon Prime. Yeah, I think.
All right. We got to wrap up. So we'll go with any podcasts anybody are listening to or wanting to put a shout out to. Walt?
Oh, Lord. I'm listening to so many. The first one I want to mention is the Seinfeld Minute. I have I'm in 3 episodes that are coming out, I think, this week. One of them dropped today. The second one I want to mention real quick is called Monster. And season 1, they did the Atlanta child murders from the 70s and 80s. Season 2, they profiled the Zodiac killer. And season 3, which is what I just started this weekend, the DC sniper case is being profiled. It's one of the best investigative true crime documentary series out there, in my opinion. So if you get a chance, just check out Atlanta Monster, the Zodiac Monster, the Zodiac Killer, or the DC Sniper.
Excellent. Eric, you got any podcasts you listen to? Anybody you want to give a shout out to?
I'll listen to, I like Sam Harris's Making Sense a lot. Joe Rogan, depends on the guest, but I like him a lot as well. And then Micah Hanks. He does a lot of UFO stuff, paranormal stuff. He was also kind enough to blurb my book, Chasing Disclosure. And then, of course, the Black Vault Radio, Somewhere in the Skies with Ryan Sprague. And then another one, it's a lot of fun. You guys might be interested if you did like In Search Of that we talked about earlier. A couple of guys got together and they're doing In Research Of, where they're watching the old shows and showing why they were wrong.
That's awesome.
Really?
Yeah. It's called In Research Of.
That would be great. I would love to check that out.
Yeah. So almost all of it, In Search Of, is on YouTube. So they just watch them and then they come together for about an hour and they talk about it. They're like, okay, this one was about the Bermuda Triangle and here's why that's not really a mystery. But they also talk about like Leonard Nimoy's sweaters and
Oh, that's great.
It's like,
great.
yeah, he was wearing this one at that time. And this is, yeah, it's really good. It's by the same guy who does Monster Talk, which is another really good podcast if you're interested in like the Chupacabra and cryptids and Bigfoot and stuff like that, Loch Ness Monster. It comes from a skeptic point of view. So yeah, check out In Research Of. That's a lot of fun.
Awesome.
They're on season 2 right now. So
all right. For me, I'm going to go to our good friends. I mentioned him already with the Clint cast, but I'm mentioning the 60 Minutes With again for this reason. Chris, who is a longtime podcaster with that group, he and I, when we started chatting about things, we discovered we had a mutual love of Metallica. And so we've been kicking around this idea for a while, and then all of a sudden it sort of popped up. Why don't we talk about our first remembrances? And then we're going to start going through in a limited sort of mini series. We're going to start now looking at one album at a time, starting with Kill 'Em all the way through to the S&M album that actually opens with Ecstasy of Gold. See how this all ties together. We had our first episode drop a few weeks ago. It was part of their sound check show. If you've listened before, 60 Minutes With is actually the banner name of the podcast. They actually have sub shows underneath, and you just check out the name of each show. They have sound check shows, ABC of Gaming, the Rant Show. They've got the Clint cast about Clint Eastwood. So just depending, I like them all. You may not, but the sound check spotlight on Metallica, the pilot show dropped. And then we're going to start breaking those individual albums down every couple of months or so because we want to get listener feedback. So go check out the first one, that first episode. We want to know, do you remember your very first song that you ever heard from Metallica? And if you do you remember what was the second song that really sort of did it for you? Like you said, okay, that's it. I'm going to be a fan of this band. And we want to kind of get a little feedback before going and recording episode 2. So check that out, 60 Minutes With, on your podcatchers of choice. And I think we got some really good suggestions out there for people to have in their ears when there's nothing else to do.
all right.
Walt, where can people go to learn more about the Wilder Ride and our Listeners Lounge?
As always, the best place to find out about us is our website, www.thewilderride.com. And from there, you're going to get all of our past episodes, guests, bios for Alan and I, in case you're wondering, why am I listening to these two idiots and who are they? A list of all our shows, links to those. And anything that's coming up that we need to let you know about will be found there. Also, you will find a link to all of our social media, which you can also find us anywhere at The Wilder Ride.
And that's going to do it for us. Eric, thanks so much for joining us, man. It's been so good to have you.
Oh, thanks. We got to do this more often.
All right. With that said, come back next week. We're going to have another brand new guest. These shows drop every Tuesday. Don't forget to rate and review, but more importantly, hit that share button. Share this episode on social media if you liked it. Spread the love, spread the word. We love everybody that we have on our show, and it helps them as well. So help us out by getting the word out and sharing to as many of your friends and family as you can. Till next week, take care, everybody.
Well, Alan,
Oh my God,
it was
I can't
nice knowing
believe
you.
that. I
Yeah.
know. And the thing is, I know she probably just sat outside the door and kept listening.
So what do
And
you?
then when she heard me laugh,
What are you late?
that's not good.
What are you late for?
I don't focus on things that are important. I do this.
Well, yes, that is true.
So I'm a bad boy.
This is important to me, though.
If you're anything like
it's
me, though,
important
it's
to
like
Walt.
you'll remember all these facts that really don't mean anything other than to you. But you remember something about like where you're supposed to be with your wife. And
Well, it's not that I'm supposed to be anywhere. It's just I was taking longer than I said I would. I put on the calendar 5:30 to 7. I'm 17 minutes late.
Damn you, Alan. Damn you.